Hey, everybody. Welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indy podcast or vlogcast, because we are doing this on video via Zoom. My name is Eugene Driscoll. I'm with valleyindy.org. It's a nonprofit online newspaper, primarily covering Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour in Connecticut's lower Naugatuck Valley. So today we're going to talk about something that is very special, very worthy, something that's been in the news now for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. We're going to be talking about the Valley Refugee Resettlement Project, and joining me are the co-chairs of that project to talk about what it is and how you can help. I'm joined by Mr. Robert Margolies and Richard Knoll. And I think maybe Robert's not on camera for anybody who's watching, but I'm going to turn it over to Robert to sort of explain what exactly is the Valley Refugee Resettlement Project. Take it away, Robert.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Eugene, for having us. This is a really important project that's very meaningful for us and the community. And I think, like myself, we've gotten involved with this because we hear about so many refugees that need a place to come and get refuge from terrorism or war or being persecuted. And they're not finding homes. And the U.S. As a value has always welcomed and accepted refugees to our country. And with all what's going on, we're trying to find a way to help people. And we're trying to do it in a local way. So we have become one of what are 20 groups around the state, or 20 or more groups around the state that are local community groups that are hooked up with IRIS, which is a larger group in the state that's hooked up with the State Department. And so there's a path for refugees to get from where they are right now to a local community where they can be accepted and welcomed and have all the resources that they'll need here. And so this is a very complicated project. And even with this small local group, we've got to do tons of background work and getting ready to welcome a refugee so that they're safe and happy and have a place to go and fit into the community. And we really need a lot of help with this. There's three co-chairs here.
And let me jump in, Robert, because I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, because I failed to mention that this is this program, the Valley Refugee Resettlement Project, which you two co-chair. This is a program that was started by the Huntington Congregational Church over in Shelton. And the IRIS that Robert mentioned, that's the Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services. That is a longtime nonprofit here in Connecticut, based in New Haven. It's been around since 1982. It's a part of the Great Give every year. The Valley Indy's done stories, and so has the New Haven Independent, about lives that organization has made better by taking refugees and welcoming them and getting them set up here in Connecticut. So let me throw it back to you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just realized I failed to mention that.
Thank you so much for putting all that context with it. And it's a church-based program in the sense that we are the ones that are volunteering, and we organized it through Huntington Congregational Church here in Shelton, out of our generosity committee to find a meaningful project for us to get involved in. And so it did evolve through them, but it has no affiliation with the church in a religious way or anything like that. We're just a group of volunteers trying to help find a home for one family at a time here in the Valley. So this process is complex enough that we are going to really need some help with funding, and we're going to really need some volunteers who we know that there's just a backlog of people who are feeling like us, who really want to do something and find some way to help. There's 25 million refugees in the world, and only 1% get settled in a welcoming country like the U.S. So it's a very small part, but if we can help even one family to get settled here, that's a major giving project to really help a family with. So that's what we're trying to do. And we need help from people out there to help us do that.
If I could jump in, Bob, I just, want to say that, at this point, before we can even accept a family, or begin to file an application to be a co-sponsored agency organization, we have to recruit 25 volunteers and get them trained and raise minimum of $10,000, and our goal is 15,000. So we've already started organizing. We're recruiting. We have somewhere in the vicinity of about 15 people that are interested, and we're talking to them about what training is involved, and we've already received about $5,200 in donations and grants. So we're sort of on our way. What we expect later on this summer that we will have a full contingent of volunteers, with the minimum is 25, as I said, and if we can get the money, the people in place, we can file an application with IRIS to be a community co-sponsor. Once that's accepted and we're approved, we will be eligible to get a family. But the application process means that we have to map out the community and identify all of the resources that are there that we're going to use. And that covers everything from transportation to education to health and employment and housing. So, our job will be, when we do get a family, to set up an apartment, co-sign the lease with the family, get them enrolled in ESL programs, education system, and get all of their benefits that they might be entitled to sort of in place. There are 3 programs actually that are involved here. One is the reception and placement program for just refugees in general. The other is the Afghan placement and assistance program. Then the third one is the Ukrainian program. These are all run by the State Department, and IRIS receives their families from them. Between October last year and March, IRIS placed 490 Afghan families in the New Haven and Hartford region, and in Connecticut, using 30 community co-sponsors and their own staff. So all of the Afghans that were in U.S. Army bases in the States have been settled, and now they're just wanting to resettle all of those Afghans and Syrians that are overseas, that have already been vetted and are just waiting to come from places like Qatar and so on. So our timeline sort of stretches out into the summer right now.
And it's quite, I was just Googling. I'm completely ignorant of what it takes to get a refugee here safe into America, part of the vetting process. This is all brand new to me. But you just see it at the end. We always see the end result, on the local news, where there's the happy, joy story of the families arrived. But it's like you have to prepare what seems like a phone book of documentation and so much infrastructure and logistical planning. All this has to be in place. You're essentially this Valley Refugee Resettlement Project. It's project in the most project sense of the word. You're setting up a whole infrastructure so you can do this, correct? How involved is it? And how important? It says 25 is your minimum number for volunteers. Could you use more than that? How involved is this?
Well, I'll start off and say it's incredibly involved. We're dealing with the State Department rules and regulations, so we've got to be cognizant of all of that. We've got to set up transportation systems, employment plans. We've got to do an assessment of the skills of the folks coming in. We've got to create an educational plan that we're going to have to introduce the families to our culture. Right? That's probably the hardest thing, particularly if they don't have a familiarity with the English language. That could be a major challenge. And we're at this point, we're actually looking at donations of furniture that have been offered to us, and we've got more than we have a lot anyhow at this point. But the structure, you're right, we can use many more volunteers than 25. I think we're going to have almost a dozen work committees that are going to deal with all these areas. So we're looking for leadership in each of those areas, from transportation to employment to education to culturalization to family finances and housing, healthcare, interpretation. I'll stop right there.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I just shared my screen just so people, because my next question is, if I'm someone who wants to volunteer, how do I do it? Or if I want to donate, how do I do it? And if people are watching this on video, I just shared a page from the Huntington Congregational Church. I just Googled that, or you Google Valley Refugee Resettlement Project, or you can find the Huntington Congregational Church on Facebook, and they have a page where you can do all this. Is that correct?
Certainly is, and I thank you so much for putting that on there. I'm sorry I can't be on the screen I'm not having video, but we're taking care of all the complexities up front with a lot of leadership organization and meetings and things, and we're going to help volunteers to go through the process step by step. And most of the work, even though there's a lot of preparation work, comes when the refugee arrives. And then we need lots of volunteers because there's so many things to do, as Rich just described, between getting people into programs they need to, getting the documents they need, helping them to acculturate in various ways. You know, if you can just imagine yourself landing in a country without knowing the language and having perhaps a number of children and starting to navigate how to do things, and maybe you haven't used the internet and so on and so forth. It's that in itself is a big task. And so we try to help families through that process. And that's why we need volunteers who will be organized in groups, and they will have a leader of their group. You know, we'll be able to find ways for them to contribute themselves that they really are motivated to do.
And just looking real fast on the website here, we are seeking volunteers to help teach English as a second language, drive to appointments, set up housing, obtain supplies, apply for jobs, teach driving skills, arrange medical care appointments, and so much more. And then is there a phone number or email that people might use to inquire more about this and to get involved?
Rich, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've been using my phone and email. Bob, I'm happy to put that out there. It's quite simple. It's rknoll@snet.net, rknoll@snet.net. Please email me, and phone number is 203-888-1101.
Okay, great. And then before I'll stop sharing my screen so everything's going to get jumbled for a second. Hold on. All right, we're still here. Before we went live, not that we're live, but recording, you know what I mean? I heard you gentlemen talking about there might be a story you wanted to share or a narrative you wanted to share so people get an idea of the human side of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I have a story that Irish published, which is a nice example to help understand how the process works for a Congolese family that resettled here. So after living in a refugee camp in Tanzania for 5 years, a Congolese family of 9 is finally approved for resettlement to the U.S. Department of State. And you got to remember the vetting process on the other side is a lot. They have to prove to the Department of State that they are a valid refugee, that they're under duress, that they'd be in danger if they went back to their country, and so forth. And then they have to be vetted in a variety of ways, background checks and so forth. So they may have already gone through a long process to become eligible to the Department of State with a designation as a refugee. The family's asked if they have any relatives or friends living in the U.S. They say, yes, we have a cousin living in Middletown, Connecticut. The Department of State, this group that's working with them, knows their refugee resettlement affiliate, IRIS, is close to Middletown. IRIS will be asked to find a place for this family. IRIS says yes. 2 months later, Iris receives an arrival notice for the case. Congolese family of 9 slated to arrive in 10 days. All family members speak Swahili. The mom speaks some French, no major medical issues. Iris determines the family is a good candidate for co-sponsorship. We are a co-sponsorship group. The co-sponsorship group reviews the application and green lights forms. There are 3 groups that could possibly resettle the family. Iris decides to offer the co-sponsorship to a group in East Haddam because their application indicates they're prepared to help a family resettle to Middletown, a sustainable community close to East Haddam. They've been able to find 4-bedroom apartments in Middletown for $1,300 or less, and they have access to Swahili interpreters. Iris makes the co-offer of co-sponsorship, and the group enthusiastically accepts. On arrival day, staff meets the family at JFK, escorts them through passport control and customs. IOM has contracted a shuttle van to drive the family to their final destination, the Iris office in New Haven, where 2 members of the East Haddam group meets them for the first time and takes them home to Middletown. So you can see
Comprehensive, yeah.
what has to go into that process.
Yeah, and let me just ask you both, in terms of the creation of this project here in the lower Naugatuck Valley, was there any one event or something that was really, that lit the spark to get this tremendous undertaking locally off the ground? Was there something you saw or read or heard about?
I can speak for myself by saying that, when I looked at the fate of the Afghan refugees last year, I got in touch with Iris, and I think Bob's church Huntington Church did the same, and Iris connected us very late in the year or beginning of this year, and said, I had a couple of people that were interested in, and Bob's church committee was working on the same idea, and we got together over Zoom and decided that we felt very strongly that the Valley should have a part in this effort. There's no co-sponsor agency in the Valley right now or near it, and we thought, we have the resources to do this. The Valley had sort of been seen as an area that didn't have good public transportation systems, and therefore they didn't quite. Iris never was able to reach out here and didn't place anybody here. So that was my start. Bob, you can comment further.
No, I'm the same. Our church also had Reverend Lucille Fritz really brought the idea to the Generosity Committee and asked me to look into it further. And I contacted Iris and Chris George, the Iris head, and I had a conversation, and then we just continued to have our church approve us being a fiduciary for the group, and getting church members involved and so forth. So that's where it started on my end.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, both for coming on here and talking about this project. If anybody's listening or watching or reading, and if you see this video or you're listening to this podcast, I will include under wherever you're listening or watching this, all the links that you need to learn more, to volunteer, to donate to this worthy project. And I mean, and you can't argue that it's not a worthy project. I mean, what is, I can't think of anything more important, especially given all that's been on the news, at least the last year. So is there anything else that either of you gentlemen want to add before we call it a day?
Well, I just think, that it's the community out there that's going to make the project, and that this kind of work for individual volunteers is helpful to connect them with other community members, and to be able to express their desire to help in a meaningful and concrete way. So I'm hoping people will go to those links and call Rich's number.
Yeah, Jane, one other fact, Jane, I think, if we can expect maybe a family in August or September time period, landlords in the Valley or employers who, want to get in touch with us with, possibility of a rental and an entry level job, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it, and best of luck.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks very much.